Welcome to the Vital Path Podcast, where nervous system science meets spiritual growth through honest conversations with men who've done the work. Today on the Vital Path Podcast, we have Jeddy Azuma, founder of Rising Man and now the executive director. He's been in the men's empowerment space since 2008. He's a father, a husband, and an ally to me. Thank you for being here, Jeddy.
Honored to be here, man. It's been a while since we sat down, so it's a cool way to do it.
For sure. And I've got many memories that stick out with you. We were just talking before about how we've sweat together and trained together, pushed our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I got to experience your magic, even around dinner. We've shared meals and gotten to know you personally. But the thing that stands out to me the most is the rite of passage experience that I got in the wilderness with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're a wilderness rite of passage guide. And when I tell people about this, they go, huh? You decided to go out in nature for 4 days and fast? What? And so my question is, how do you even explain what a rite of passage is? And just to somebody who's never heard of that before.
That's been the challenge of my life for the last decade. Since I started to learn how to do this work and then take more and more guys out. I've had the privilege and honor of taking over 100 guys out myself. And I've talked to hundreds more who are considering this. So to answer your question, what do I usually tell guys when they're like, what is this? What's this all about? Let's just say for the absolute layman, someone who doesn't have any context or reference for a rite of passage or ceremony or anything of that ilk, I tell them that it's an opportunity to create unique conditions for clarity. Because it's not just fasting. It's time alone in the wilderness. It's free of technology. It's not interacting with any other human beings. It's literally sitting alone for an extended period of time. 4 days feels like a long time, and I know you can attest to that. When you've got nothing else to do, no agenda, no musical instruments. I mean, we really strip all the extra volume out of the equation so you can sit in the cacophony of clarity that comes from just being in nature and being in a natural state. So oftentimes people who don't have any ceremonial reference or understanding of a rite of passage, at least they can connect with, so I'm going to have a lot of time to really listen to what that inner voice is telling me. That's usually where I start. Then I also speak to something that even people who don't understand or have a reference point for ceremony and rites of passage, that feeling that all humans, especially men, have inside of themselves at some point to do hard things, to see what they're made of, right? To prove to themselves that they're ready for more responsibility, more opportunities, more ways to serve and be valuable in the world. That's a calling that I believe every man has at different intervals of his life. So usually I can speak to that, and that's what gets the conversation rolling, and then guys start to warm up to the idea. But man, it's the hardest thing about my job because, as you know, there's no way to capture that experience in words. It's not the kind of thing that we go out there with a film crew and we're documenting it because it's sacred, and that's not for us to do. So, it's challenging, but, so far, so good.
Yeah. I'm a living testament to that.
Yeah.
And it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
With the intention that you brought into that, crossing over a threshold, the preparation process ahead of time to really get clear about what I'm letting go in the wilderness and who I'm coming back as,
right,
the man that I choose to be. That experience to me was missing and is missing in society. And I think is a huge key for perhaps many lost or confused men in this world. What has happened as a byproduct of men not having this type of experience with that level of intention to transition from boyhood to manhood?
I recently had the privilege of speaking with a man named Bill Plotkin, who's been one of the more modern instrumental titans in the world of rites of passage. He has a background in psychology and psychotherapy. What he would call it is this extended adolescence that modern male humans are going through. It's well documented, multiple journals, peer reviews, everything, that adolescence doesn't end at 18 anymore. And it never did, honestly. It never ended. It was never a number. it's a psychological maturity, and there's very clear indicators. So what we see is there's an extension of adolescence that conservatively goes until the late 20s, early 30s. And I would say a greater reflection of the failure in leadership from men and from the masculine force in the world is also a reflection of this extended adolescence, especially when we treat adolescence or think of adolescence as more self-serving, more self-reflective, self-indulgent. That's the period of life where we're supposed to be that way developmentally. But if we never initiate ourselves into the next phase of male development, then we just have a bunch of man boys.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody's so up in arms about. I mean, it's everywhere right now. So that's like the primary cost. But then you think about the ripples that has into families. This isn't just men who are hurting. This is everyone hurting as a result of this.
I've witnessed that in my own life and had conversations with, just this week, a CEO of a bank, a chief credit officer of a bank, who are sharing their stories about still needing that adolescence, that adventure, that my dream is still to go right off and travel and be into the sunset and be free of all of the worldly obligations and responsibilities that I have. And I name that just because it doesn't just happen in circles that you and I run with. This happens all over the world.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just caused ripple effects both in business and in families that truly matter. And what I got to experience in that was so profound for me. I was ready to, run into my life. I was so inspired. I had this intuition coming back from the wilderness, and I was ready to go win my ex back, literally drive from nature with a thick beard, not having shaved for 8 days, and to go win her back, right? And you advised me in that moment to, let's take a beat and not make any big decisions for the next 6 months. And I just really appreciated that counsel that can apply to any sort of peak experience. Why offer that to men coming out of the wilderness?
Yeah, well, not just the wilderness. I think in the grand scheme of things, mature masculinity is about stretching our timelines and not being in such a hurry. One of my favorite things to say to the young guys who have that ambition and drive, and I know it better than anybody, man. I'm a fiery guy. I've always been wanting to go hit that next target. So I understand what that feels like. But I've also learned that unless I come to an untimely demise, right? Unless I get hit by a bus or my life ends prematurely, I'm going to live for a pretty long time. I've got decades in front of me, God willing. And if that's the case, what's the rush? What's the rush? Especially for men. What am I actually rushing towards? And usually when you get underneath the honesty of it, it's significance. Guys want so badly to do something valuable in the world, and that's not something that should be rushed, So this conversation around mature masculinity, I tell guys, throw out the clock. I don't care how old you are. I'm noticing now that they used to say for women, the biological clock is ticking. It's happening for guys too. They get into their 30s and 40s and they're starting to think, I should have a family by now. And a lot of people don't acknowledge that because it's, that it's more typical with women, and men can have kids into their 50s, 60s, 70s if they want to, but it's a real thing that men are experiencing. And so they charge forward into it. And there's this impatience that creates recklessness and oftentimes pulls them off the path of what their true purpose is. So guys coming out of the wilderness who are really in tune, right? Because you've just been in this container, this vessel where all the volume's been really low. Of course, you want to charge out of the forest or off of the mountain and go and give that gift that you have to the world. And inside, I'm like, young man, go do that. I want you to do that. But take a breath. It's a long race. It's not a sprint, So
I've always appreciated that. Healing happens at the pace of nature. And when you're out there, you feel that. And that's in direct contrast to the pace of the outside world. And I love what you said about significance. It's so often that we perhaps feel that's the human need as men that we're seeking, when in fact it's contribution or love and connection truly underneath that. But I wanted to touch deeper on the developmental phases of men.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really useful mental model or framework by Alison Armstrong that's been very informative for me, and I share with a lot of my guys. And the reason I do that is because when I saw myself through that lens, when I first read that book, I saw where I was at. I had just left kind of the night zone. I was moving towards early Prince. And now looking back, I can confidently say at 35, I'm in the middle Prince of my life. And I have no shame about that because I took a path from corporate finance onto spirit-led life. And that's just been my way. But I'd love if you could maybe offer a little bit of a teaching on that framework and explore that developmental process.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I love Alison's work. I consider myself a student of hers as well. And we incorporate similar archetypal models in Rising Men. So without going into real depth and detail, everyone should go listen to her amazing Development of Men. It's like a 60-minute lecture where she lays this out really well. But I think what's probably most relevant for the men we're talking about is that transition, like you mentioned, from knighthood into princehood, which has 3 different stages to it, and then onward into king. My first stop on this talk is guys who are calling themselves kings, like these young guys, like changing their Instagram name, like king this or that, or like who wants to be a king? It's like, bro, what are we talking about? Like, and kings don't crown themselves, right? That's one thing. That's what I love about her model is that's very indicative of knighthood, where it's all about, she says fun and adventure. Those are the 2 words that she highlights. I think of experiences. When I try to relate this to young men, because even that, the pursuit of fun and adventure on a societal level has been made to be wrong. You shouldn't be going out and having fun and you should be getting serious, right? And they try to push people through these developmental stages too quickly. Whereas gathering experiences is what we need to build the kingdom. You got to go out. You got to let life toss you around in the waves a little bit and find your breath again to know what you want to create and what you want to build. And guys who try to do that prematurely because they want to present as more ready than they actually are, they skip that step. And probably the most important thing about that model that Alison has is you cannot skip through developmental stages. And if you do, the only outcome is go back to square one and have to go through it again. This is why men hit midlife crises. This is why men get divorced. This is why guys have career identity breakdowns at stages of their life where they should be relishing the kingdom that they've built. And there's a whole multitude of reasons why that might happen for men, but I'd say largely you can always kind of relate it back to this. Well, something wasn't complete in that adolescence of knighthood to where a man got to start building something with the wrong person, in the wrong career or industry, in the wrong part of the world, all the above, who knows? And it creates a lot of pain and hardship because a man can't ignore the fact that that part of him is incomplete. He can try to stuff it down. He can, hold his breath and throw his head through concrete every day. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be able to ignore that voice that's saying, hey, there's unfinished business there. So yeah, it's a really useful model.
It is.
And I think when you speak that into men, they're like, oh, like that makes a lot of sense.
It does. It really does. I wasn't even aware this developmental process existed. And to be able to see myself non-judgmentally where I was at when I first read that book was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And at first I felt the guilt and the shame about not being where I thought I needed to be.
Right.
And then it was just a settling into, oh, this is just the natural process for me at 35 and at 38. It's different for every man. No shame, no judgment there. But I'm curious where you believe you're at in your process.
Yeah, this is great. Someone asked me this question recently too. I'd say that I feel like I'm in middle princehood, but what Alison refers to as the tunnel that men face going from late princehood into king, it's like I can see the tunnel. It's like I'm on the highway and I see signs that say tunnel ahead. I don't know exactly how close I am to that, but I'm starting to have some of those reflections that Alison talks about. She says that men have to go through a period of review where we ask ourselves, did I choose well? Did I accomplish my mission? Did I do what I set out to do? And we have to go and we have to look at that. I'm not there yet. I know that I'm not. I'm still putting the finishing touches on this kingdom that I've been building, but I can feel like it's right there. So she says that middle princehood could be 10 to 20 years. It's one of the biggest chunks of a man's life. She also says it's not a specific amount of time, but it can feel like a long time. So I'm probably at least on the back half of middle princehood is how I feel right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you leveling because
Yeah.
you're right. There's a lot of this I'm the king mentality,
Sure.
and that's crowned by somebody else. There's a recognition, there's a king energy that exists in somebody that doesn't need to be vocalized.
Mm.
It's felt. And before we kind of transition, I've really got to ask you about these experiences that we all get to have along the way.
Mm.
And for me, the rite of passage was one that just shaped me in the man that I am today and who I continue to become.
Mm.
And it's spoken. You've said this is a lifelong integration process,
Mm.
something so significant that one gets to return back to and reflect on time to time. My curiosity is, what does that look like for a man who's got a full calendar, a family, business obligations? How does one sustain this lifelong integration?
Yeah, well, I usually harken back to Data's work and Way of the Superior Man. I imagine a lot of people have had exposure to that. He speaks about purpose in that book as something that is so critical to a man that nothing can be a higher priority than that in his life. And my understanding of it, what he means by that is that a man can't sacrifice or forfeit his connection to his purpose in exchange of anything else, a relationship, his children. It's not to abandon those responsibilities and ignore them. And it's more to weave that beautiful life together without compromising on that unique call that he has. So I usually think about that as the starting reference point. Every man has to come into contact with that. Every man has to uncover what that is within himself and then figure out, well, how do I blend that into my life? And the only way I've found to be successful in that with the marriage, with the kids, with the businesses, with everything that I have going on in my life is to stay as close to the community of men, of other women who know who I am and what I received from my rites of passage and the declarations that I've made, the commitments I've made to who I am. Community is such an integral component of that. In Rising Man and the legacy that we come from, we use the word incorporation, parallel or adjacent to integration, because it really means to incorporate, to bring into our bodies, meaning I have to go actually do work. I got to put footsteps under these visions and dreams. I can't just think about them or talk about them from time to time. So the accountability that community creates as a function of just knowing who I said I was and hearing my story, right? So how do busy men fit that into their lives? What I usually tell guys, you can't afford not to. Because if you sacrifice or sell out on the things that matter to you relative to your purpose, you're going to resent everything else in your life that seems to be in the way. You'll resent your partner. You'll resent your kids. You'll resent your mortgage and your taxes and everything else because that part of you is not being fueled. So men can't afford not to pursue that purpose or make time for it. I get it, man. I don't know too many people that are busier than I am. I know there's a lot of busy people, but we got to find ways to do it. And usually where guys are suffering is they're not making time for the important things for themselves, you know? So got to figure it out. It's not easy. It's not easy to do that by any means, but it's a non-negotiable.
And it has been for me. Just building that into my life as a non-negotiable has been the foundation when I forget myself to have other strong men remind me, hey, this is the commitments that you've made.
Right.
These are the declarations that I've heard you say. Can we come back to that, come back to center and move forward on that path?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've heard you speak this into me. It's having 10 strong men at your back. You feel like you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that lesson I've embodied and choose to carry forward. For somebody who doesn't have that, where would they start to find brotherhood? And why is that so important? I hope you're enjoying this conversation. If you've been feeling dysregulated or overwhelmed lately, I want to help. I created a nervous system quiz that gives you a personalized practice that shifts you back to presence, calm, and connection. It's free, takes 5 minutes, and are the exact tools I use myself. Just click the link in the show notes to take it. Now back to the show.
I mean, these days, man, if guys are willing and they're open enough to it, I'd say you got two guys right here who can direct you to the right place. It's not very complicated. There's a lot of different versions of men's work and men's organizations and how we do what we do, but the same. They're all different types of bread, but at the base, it's still flour, salt, and water. It's sit down, create a safe environment, start sharing vulnerably, declare some actions, and create a culture of accountability. You can do that with your church group. You can do that with your best friends. You can do, as long as you have those components and some really simple agreements holding the arrangement together, then you can get started. A lot of guys, they either don't have the confidence or they doubt themselves or they make it more complicated than it needs to be. But that's really what it boils down to. Now, if there's a guy who doesn't have any men like that in his life, I don't even know where to start because so many guys, they don't even have a best friend in the world anymore. Well, then find a community that is based around the things you're interested in. If you're an outdoors person, find an organization that does stuff outdoors like we do. If you're an entrepreneur, there's men's organizations and groups that are centered around that. Start with common interest and then invest in relationship, because that's another one of my big things. The most valuable currency on the planet is relationships. So if you want to have that, you have to invest the time into it, but it doesn't have to be so complicated. You don't need some sort of like men's guru who's going to teach you all the tricks of the trade. No, it's flour, salt, and water. It's sit down, make it safe, be honest, and then do some things, because you can't just talk about it either. I would say that's one of the red flags to think about, is if you're just sitting down and guys are just talking about stuff, but nothing's ever actually happening or getting done. That's not quite it. It's getting close, but it's not quite it. We got to put action behind it. Otherwise, it's an incomplete formula,
And you named the agreements as being an essential piece to that piece of bread.
Mm-hmm.
Could you name some of the agreements briefly?
Sure. Yeah, I'll name the ones that I think are most important. And I'm sure a lot of other men who are doing good work would agree. It starts with confidentiality, right? We got to know that what I share here isn't going to make its way into someone's partner's ear, right? They're not going to go home and share it with their wife. They're not going to talk about it at work. It's going to live and die right here. And that's an essential requirement, because I need to know that I can share anything, right? So I'd say as number one, I'm really big on non-judgment. And I usually explain non-judgment as, I don't know, I'm not going to agree with you on everything. In fact, it's better if we don't. However, I'm not going to make you wrong for what you believe. In fact, I'll commit to be curious about it. Maybe there's something for me to learn there. Maybe you have a perspective that I've never considered. So I'm not going to judge you for it, make you wrong about it, right? I don't have to agree with you. And maybe at the end of it, we still choose to see it differently, but judgment's about making someone wrong for what they believe. That's a really important one. A general culture of honor and integrity, which very simply, do what you said you were going to do. And if you fail to do what you said you were going to do, clean it up, address it, however that has to look. I'm trying to keep it as vanilla as possible here, but that can carry you a long way. And then depending on the arrangement and the culture that you're building with whomever you're gathering with, you can add more or take some things away from it. But at the core, I'd say those are three critical pieces that if any of those are missing, it's not quite what we're talking about.
Yeah. And naming these is important, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And some cultures, perhaps in business or other organizations, maybe have these subconsciously, but they're not out in the open. So I'm curious how you might apply some of these agreements or principles to the boardroom or business. What would be possible if people applied this in other domains of life?
Well, I have the great privilege of working with a lot of executives and a lot of leadership teams. Some of my clients have businesses or are founders of businesses, and so they brought me in to work with their teams because some basic relational skills are lacking in modern human beings. For example, communicating about breakdowns, right? Here's an example, okay? Let's say that for this podcast, We calendared it. We said, hey, this is going to be awesome. We set a time up, and 1:30 comes around and you're here, but I'm not. And clock starts moving, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I'm not here, right? There's all different weird, awkward types of ways that people would navigate a situation like that in the world. Forget it never happened, ghost, make an excuse, right? Probably the worst thing we can do versus just owning it, acknowledging it, speaking to it and saying, hey, how can I make this right? Right? There's simple things like that people it's just so foreign to them because it wasn't modeled, it wasn't taught. It's not modeled by the leadership within the organization, so people don't do it. And then it harbors resentment and doubt and lack of trust, and it creates all these really unnecessary symptoms and byproducts of very simple relationship tools. So that's just an example of how much of an impact it can have for people who don't operate that way in the world. But on the flip side, when you start applying some of these really simple relational things, it's groundbreaking. And we start to remember, oh, just because we're at work doesn't mean that we stop being human. Just because we have titles and a hierarchy doesn't mean that we don't have feelings that we need to be mindful of in order to have the best collaboration we can. And so, I mean, that's a whole spiral off of a conversation, but I think just in general, humans forgot how to relate to each other. It's so apparent at every level of society.
Yeah, it is. And I had forgotten some of these relational principles, how to build rapport, how to clean up my own mess and take accountability for, in this example, not showing up at the right time and just taking ownership of it and being willing to extend oneself to make it right.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed too is when people communicate like that, it's an opening. It's an opportunity for them to come together more about that breakdown or rupture in relationship. So useful. And we've talked about perhaps even post-COVID, things getting a little weird with people and how to relate to one another. You have a very unique perspective of being in men's empowerment for a very long time, since at least 2008. And Rising Man's been an organization for 8 years, kind of seen this rise in popularity of men's work. And the Sacred Sons of the world have come out. These 13 Pines have emerged. And there's, what I'm noticing is a bit of backlash on some people maybe not getting what they needed from this. So I'm curious to ask you, as the leader of this organization, what separates, for lack of a better word, quality men's work that's really transforming people's lives, and then some that's, say, bypassing or just not getting the job done?
Yeah. I'm not trying to be overly PC, but I really like to call it just an incomplete education, because I think I know the founders of all these organizations, many of them out there. I know there's more and more springing up every day, but I know that there's good-hearted men who have a lot to offer to other men. That's the thing, is that there's a lot of teachers and mentors out there who have really good stuff to offer. Where I usually see the fail point, where I've seen it consistently time and time again, is there's a gap between concept and practice. There's a gap between idea and implementation. And the big word for me is always action. Like I said before, we can sit around and we can talk about our feelings. We can even get to some really big depth and insight, tears everywhere, right? But if that doesn't translate to me doing something differently, it's an incomplete process. And I don't think that there's, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone in particular, but just in general, where the backlash comes from, especially from participants, where they don't feel fully taken care of, is some aspect of that. I either wasn't challenged into it, or it wasn't modeled for me, or they didn't show me how to do that. I like to empower people. I don't want to do anybody's hard work for them, but I'm also not going to let guys off the hook for just talking about stuff. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time for everybody. And so I think that's one piece. I also think that there's, again, I'm not speaking to anyone in particular, but I think there's some people who learn some things and get really excited about what they have, and then go to offer that to other people before they've fully embodied it. And it's not like, one of my favorite stories, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but it's one I love to tell with anybody. So I started doing capoeira when I was traveling. So part of my story was, I lived in New York. was working as a PT and knew that I couldn't keep doing that. So I had this instinct to go travel, and I did a walkabout for 4 months. And one of the great encounters I had was taking my first capoeira class. And that set me off on a 12-year journey of doing capoeira and just fully immersing into that culture. But I got so similar to how I am with CrossFit right now, right? I got so ensconced by it, and I was just training multiple times a day, every day. I couldn't get enough. And for 4 months, I did that. And then I was moving from New York to California. So I was having a farewell class with the community in New York. And the mestre there, he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Hey, you should teach this." And I was really confused. I mean, mind you, I'm 25 at the time, right? And this is a guy who'd been doing this for his whole life, telling me to teach this thing I've been learning for 4 months. What are you talking about? I'm looking around like, who are you talking to? He's like, "Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying to teach what I teach." He said, "Teach what you know." And it was such a valuable lesson. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've passed that wisdom along, because if we wait to teach what we have until we've mastered it all, we'll never pass that gift on to anybody. But what it does require is a really good self-assessment and knowledge of self and discernment to know I'm not ready to teach that yet. I know where I can send somebody to learn that. I might have it up here. And I think that's another thing. People think they got it because I can understand it up here, but can you do it when there's live ammunition? Can you do it when it really counts in somebody's life? You've seen somebody else navigate someone through a dark process. Can you do the same? And if you don't have that confidence that you can, then you shouldn't be doing it. I think some people just either maybe they weren't mentored in knowing where that line is, or maybe they got fast tracked into something, or they just crowned themselves with that wisdom. And that's just not the way it's supposed to work. That's another aspect of it, just like a void of mentorship and apprenticeship that I think is really needed, not just in this work, but in all trades. We got to take our time to learn these things and integrate it and not always be in such a rush,
I so appreciate that. And I have taken a kick from you, so I know it's embodied. There's definitely some power behind that. And, in my own story, when I started to sit in circles with men, it inspired me to want to carry that torch.
Sure.
And then I've taken 3 years to just do that behind closed doors, in living rooms, by campfires, not need to tell the world about it until I feel like in my heart I can hold a man in whatever they're moving through and be present with that. And so I appreciate that inspiration. And you've inspired me by holding Rising Man for 8 years. That's an enormous undertaking to be the leader of a men's organization like this. And certainly in my own path, having tried this for 3 years, there's a lot of challenges. Many times I've wanted to quit. And so I'm curious in you, what were some of the challenges that you faced along the way? And how have you kept inspired to do what you do?
Too many challenges to talk about, man. And several moments like what you just mentioned of, man, is this worth it? Should I just fold it up? Is this even working? And every time that voice of doubt creeps in, something happens, right? There's been a lot of moments where I'll be feeling kind of down or just kind of doubtful of what I was doing. And then I'll hear from somebody that I wasn't expecting to about how much of an impact I had. Or I'll see it. I'll see it playing out without anybody even reporting it to me. It's like, wow, get that. That's really special. And I've learned to really value the impact that's not measurable or quantifiable, but just having faith in the impact of things and the time that it takes for seed to really take to soil. Because if I treated it like an exchange, like I put in this amount of work, so I should see this kind of result, then I would have folded up Rising Man 7 years ago, going into 9 years now, right? I would have been just forget about it. This is not a viable product. But I never treated it like that. I treated it as something that was a calling. I didn't make the call myself. I just picked up the phone And then it just kept calling me. Every time I thought, nah, that can't be it. Or I don't know, maybe I'm not the right person for the job. Just keeps calling. So I guess to just answer your question, I never made it an option to give up on my calling. And because I decided, well, I'm never going to quit. I might fail. In fact, I will, and I'll probably still fail many times more moving forward. But quitting is not an option to me. I realized that if I don't quit, then the only outcome is winning. Because if you don't quit, you can't lose, you know? So something in that just made it really simple for me. And then fortunately, along the way, you start having enough of these confirmations that, yeah, this is working. Yes, it was worth it. Yes, it's valuable. And I won't lie to you, man. Like, even as far as we've come, I still need those hits every now and then. And they come from unexpected places. But I guess I've reached a place where the doubt that I had previously, it's just a different kind of doubt now, right? It's not an existential doubt anymore. It's like, how are we going to do this new big challenge that we've never faced before? You know?
Can you take us to that moment when you first picked up the call from Spirit, from God, whomever you relate to?
Sure. There's a couple of quick stories that I'll kind of stitch together. So the very, very first time, back to that story I told, leaving New York, where I was working as a physical therapist, going out for 4 months, one of the first things I did was I did a 10-day Vipassana sit. I'd had friends who'd done this before, and I'd always wanted to do it, so I signed up for one. And it was, for a lot of different reasons, it was one of my first big transformational experiences. But I'll never forget, on the fourth day, for people who don't know, you're meditating in silence. You're not looking people, you're not interacting with anybody. You're around people, but it's very much a you space for those 10 days. And you're meditating like 14 plus hours a day. And I remember on day 4, we're doing one of these 1.5, 2-hour meditation sessions. And it was the most, still to this day, the most present I've ever been in my life for that much of a duration. I was in my body and I never left for that amount of time. I don't even know how long it was. It felt like forever. It felt like my body grew in size. And I remember after they, completed that session, I was the first one to sit up and step outside of the pagoda. I walk outside, still feeling like my body was just vibrating. And I go out and I look up, and the sky is doing this incredible thing where there's clouds and sun beaming through. And all of a sudden it just starts gently raining. And I look up and I just start bawling, like unprovoked. I don't even know what I'm crying about. I'm just crying because life is just so real in that moment. And as I close my eyes to wipe my tears away, I see a very clear image of literally a vision behind my closed eyelids of myself sitting around a fire. And I open my eyes and I'm like, what the hell was that? Close my eyes again to wipe the tears. And I start looking around, and now I see faces. I see men looking back at me. I'm 25 years old. I've never had a vision in my life before. Yes, I've been in men's groups and organizations even at that point, but I never thought about what I was seeing right then. And then I had another 6 days to try not to focus on that, but I came out of that experience like, what does it mean? Fast forward to 2 years later. Here I am fasting on the mountain, 3rd day, and I'm getting all these clear signs. Hey, we were talking to you when you were sitting in that meditation. We were showing you something. Listen. And so I listened. And what it was telling me was, what you're getting, what we're giving you, a lot more people are going to need it. And we're not going to tell you how to do it. We're just going to tell you that this is it. And without going into story, the things that I was shown was like, wow, okay, undeniable. And even then, it was 26. I was right before my 27th birthday, a week and a half before my 27th birthday, 3 weeks before I got married to my wife, 4 months before we got pregnant with our first kid. So just this like very clear insight right before going into this completely new chapter of my life. And that was back in 2014. Here we are 12 years later. And I've just been following my footsteps ever since. I didn't come off the mountain with Rising Man in my head. I didn't know that I was going to start a podcast. I didn't even know that I was going to take men out into the wilderness myself. But I just followed the breadcrumbs, And sometimes they were really obvious. And sometimes there were large gaps between breadcrumbs, when you're following a trail and you're like, am I still on the trail? And then right when you have your doubt, maybe I'm going to turn around, you see a little, piece of thread tied. You're like, okay, still on the trail. So that's kind of how it's been for the last 12 years for me.
Man, thank you for sharing that story. I felt moved by that. Very inspired.
Yeah.
You're at a place now in reflection, going through your own initiation of sorts, and getting to look back on perhaps the impact and the lives that you've helped shape. What, whether it be through a rite of passage experience or just being involved with the men's community for years, how have you seen the lives of men change over time, not just through a weekend experience, but through years of being together? What's the importance of that?
Yeah, I call it the slow burn. It's the long game. It's being willing to run a marathon instead of looking for a sprint just so you can get it over with more quickly. It's funny. It's like the older I get, the less responsibility I actually take for any of that influence. But all of the things I can see that I've had a role to play in, because I'm not so modest or uh, pretending to be modest and ignore the fact that I know I've had impact. It's obvious, and people reflect it back to me, so I believe it. But I see the parts that I've played, and sometimes you give someone just a little bit of something. It doesn't always have to be these big grand gestures. Sometimes it's just the right thing at the right time, and that it gives someone what they need, right? Sometimes it's like someone wandering in the desert and they're just so thirsty, you just give them a cup of water. That's all I need. A little cup of water. Sometimes it's blowing some wind into someone's sails. You know how many times I've encountered men, all they needed was somebody to believe in them because they couldn't believe in themselves first. It's like, hey, man, I get it. It's hard, really hard. I'm not going to take that away from you. This is hard right now. But from where I'm standing, you can do it. I believe I've only known you for 5 minutes, but I've been there before. I don't see anything that's keeping you from getting over that hurdle there. Sometimes that's all people need. In fact, a lot of times they just need somebody to believe in them because it's like, I don't know if I can do this. A lot of times that's the impact that I've gotten to have on people because so many men have done that for me. Right. And in the most beautiful way, like coming back to these other men's organizations, if we just focus on the legacy of mentorship and we make it about what can I give to someone that someone else has given to me and just perpetuate that as far as we can in perpetuity to the future, that's all we have to do. That's all we have to do. That's all we should be focusing on is how do we give that to somebody else? Because we can't take it with us, right? What's the point on taking all this wisdom with me into the grave? Nah, I'll give what I can in all the different ways that I can.
It's beautiful. It reminded me of when I needed to borrow some belief from somebody else and how I couldn't see it in myself, but just having another man believe in me allowed me to just use that to get above the place that I was in, that darkness, whatever it is. And it's so strange where we can look across the table from one another and the thing that is the most fearful and shameful and guilty in you is nothing to me, but it requires a witness and it requires someone else to walk beside you long enough to move forward in that. And what a gift that is. It's priceless. And often it is just a hand up or a word of encouragement. It doesn't have to be the grand gestures always. So I wanted to underscore the beauty in that. And you're now transitioning Rising Man into a charitable organization as 501c3. And that must have marked a very significant shift in you. And I am curious to ask you about that transition. But first, I'd love to know, what would you do differently if you had to start it all over again?
With the knowledge I have now? Oh, man, we need a whole nother podcast to cover all of that. Well, just for starters, I would have created Rising Man as a nonprofit because that's what it was always meant to be. And that's really how we operated. I just didn't know anything about corporate structures and tax exemptions or anything like that. I was just a guy who wanted to start a podcast. And then I had a bunch of people who said, hey, we want more. And so I just built as I went. So I would say that for starters, because I never created Rising Man for myself. I never wanted to I've never tried to claim ownership of it. And so symbolically and literally, Rising Man doesn't belong to anybody anymore. It belongs to the people. Again, which it always has in spirit, but now it's obvious and it's undeniable. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would change. I mean, there's the things that people like to say, oh, I wouldn't change anything because the results are perfect. No, there's some things I could think I would have done differently. Knowing what I know now, probably could have accelerated our path to impact in a greater capacity. But I also am glad that we grew at the pace we did. One of the things I see in some of these organizations is they're born out of nothing. They explode because it's so needed. And there is something so valuable there. And it grows beyond the container that can hold it. And that was always the wisdom that I was like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to get too big too fast. We're not going to outgrow our britches. We're going to grow with the organization. We're not going to let it overcome us, because then it'll just collapse, So that's one thing that I definitely wouldn't do differently, even though I know a lot of ways that we probably could have gotten to where we are a little faster. I do think that it was perfect because we have staying power, and that journey to decide after this is just last year that we formalized the change to nonprofit. There was a couple of years where I was educating myself. I didn't know what it meant to become a nonprofit. I didn't even know how to do it. Right. So there was a lot of time I talked to lots of advisors. I talked to an attorney, so many different people, because when it came down to legal stuff, that was all pretty simple, right? It's some paperwork, it's this, it's that. But energetically, this was the best thing for Rising Man. It was obvious to me. It was obvious to me. And I checked with my counsel and everyone was like, yeah, this is the best thing for Rising Man, which means it's the best thing for the people, which made it an easy decision, or at least a simple decision, But I want to mention one of my mentors who's since passed. His name's Kent Pierce. So he was the man who started the organization that I first fasted with. And the spirit of that organization it was always about the giveaway. The gifts that we receive while we're up on the mountain, while we're fasting out there, it's not ours. We don't own or possess it. It's something that moves through us. And I remember somewhere through that process of thinking about how to go about the evolution of Rising Man, I remember Kent just like whispering in my ear, and I just heard the giveaway. I was like, that's exactly it. This is the giveaway. I don't talk about this stuff publicly because I don't really care for people to know, but I never took a salary in Rising Man for those 8 years. I was always working other jobs and clients and stuff. Like I never took a paycheck for what I was building. And I sustained it because it was so important to me, and I could see it was so important to so many people. And so that aspect, that final gesture of here, not only have I done it this way, but it's not technically mine anymore. All that, everything that Rising Man is, it belongs to all of us now. It's only been 6 months since we made that formal transition, and so much has changed, So I'm just grateful that the right people were talking in my ears, the ones from beyond and the ones who are here with me now, because the human side of me was really afraid to do that. I didn't know if it was a smart thing to do. And there were certainly people that questioned it. Like, really? You've been working on this thing for 8 years. You're just going to give it away. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I have zero regrets, not one single regret at all about that. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I was guided that way.
Yeah, so much gold there. What I've witnessed you do along that journey is empower other men to lead and give them the gifts of mentorship that you've received so that they can steward Rising Man in a beautiful way. And it's not just you as the executive director, but this truly is a community.
Yeah.
I've really admired that. And something you said in there about Ken, I want to circle back to, because just to provide people a little bit of cultural context about the rite of passage. And at least for me, when I traveled to Tanzania and got to sit with the Maasai tribe, this isn't just an indigenous rite of passage. This has happened across cultures across the world, and it's been lost. And you are a great torchbearer of this to bring it back into culture. And so could you just offer a little bit of context about the organization that is stewarding this rite of passage work into now?
Yeah. Well, thanks for speaking to that too, because that is something. Back to the first question you asked me, when I talk to guys who don't have any reference for this, I remind them a few generations back, your ancestors did this. It might have looked a little bit different. It was definitely relevant to the land that your people came from, but humans have been doing this everywhere in the world for many, many generations since the beginning of humans. So it's been going on for a long time, like hundreds of thousands of years of archaeological evidence to prove it. So I'm glad that you spoke to that, because I think that's something that a lot of people, sometimes the science helps to back up the belief. But anyway, we've really made it our mission because we recognize that rites of passage have so much to offer. I don't think it's the silver bullet or the cure-all to all of society's problems, but I do think it's a really critical piece that's missing. It's like if you ordered a piece of furniture from IKEA and they left out one of the legs of the table, it's not going to work. So we've really made it our mission to not just take guys out and initiate them, but to educate the public. We're working on a podcast series that's all about what this is and why it's missing. We're bringing in people like Bill Plotkin and some of these other names from all over to speak about what the impact has been and why it's so critical that we reintroduce these practices now. And I also make sure I tell people it doesn't have to be Compass. It doesn't have to be the way we do it in Rising Man. There's so many different ways it can be done. The Maasai, they have a unique way of initiating their young ones. So it doesn't have to be one thing in particular, but a culture without rites of passage practices and ceremonies makes it such that we have people who just continue on in the stage of development they're in with no end in sight. So we've really made it our mission to not just take people out, but to educate, to provide resources. We're currently working on gathering resources so that we can produce a documentary and really go out and show people, because I know people need to see it to understand it, and hear more about it from more people. And it's probably going to take more than just the time you and I have left on Earth to accomplish it, but we want to move that rock as far down the line as we can while we're here.
Well, you just teed me up to the question I love to ask. I got to witness the torchbearers of the men's movement, this series that you did, and brought together a number of men who have multigenerational visions. And I'd love to hear yours.
I like to try and keep it as simple as I can because I got so many things to remember in my life. So I tell myself that as long as I leave it better than I found it, in every way that I can, starting at home with my wife and my kids, if I can give them the best opportunity to launch into the world and to be who they are, then that's mission accomplished. If I can extend beyond my own home and my own family and have that impact and making other people's experience on this planet better and better with everything that I got, that's all I care about. I have no idea. We can come back here 10 years from now. I have no idea what I'll be reporting to you then about how I will be doing that. But I'm certain that that's what I will do with every breath I got left, because that's the only thing I care about. And I know that I'm limited by this lifetime. Even though I have a lot of time left, that's my plan, and I got a lot I still want to do, I know that I'm only going to be able to carry the football so far down the field. So the other thing I really care about is making a really clean exchange to the future generations and to give them something that they're proud of, something that they can actually hold with confidence as they charge into the great unknown. Because, man, it's been hard to try and carve a path in this world without a map. And I don't expect that it's going to get any easier for them. So just handing them everything that I want to take my last breath and feel empty. Like there was nothing else I could have given. Like I gave it everything I got. Like one of those CrossFit workouts where you're just like, like you're like, I'm dead. I got one health point left, or otherwise game over. Like that's what I want to feel like. Like there's just, I left it all out there.
Jeddy, thank you. If people want to get to know you better, where's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'd say these days Instagram. I've been a little bit of a ghost on there, but lately I'm all the way back. So at Jeddy Azuma on Instagram. People who want to know more about Rising Man, risingman.org, or at Rising Man Movement on Instagram. It's all there. Yeah.
Jeddy, thank you so much for your presence, for the gifts that you're giving in this world. This was an honor to have you on the podcast. This is The Vital Path. And in the meantime, go live your life. Thank you for tuning in to the Vital Path podcast. If you found value in today's episode, share the love with someone who comes to mind. It's free, they'll appreciate it, and together we'll keep this community growing. Until next time, God bless you, and go live your life.